Welcome back to another episode of Keeping Ag Real. This is Jenny Schweigert. Today's guest is an absolute incredible person who is filled with strength, determination, perseverance, and faith like I've never seen. Jacquelyne Leffler is a farmer and rancher from Kansas, and we're going to talk about her Olympic aspirations, talk about the role that the family farm and ranch plays within the beef industry, and she's going to share her experience in Washington, D.C., and watching President Trump sign a rural broadband bill. Most pressing, however, is discussing the devastating drought that they're struggling to survive through, which I was recently able to see firsthand. Before we join the conversation, Keeping Ag Real is part of the Farm, Rural, and Ag Network. Go to www.farmruralag.com to meet all of the other podcasters and bloggers. Let's join the conversation.
Yeah, we're still hurting for rain pretty bad. We've watched all the chances kind of decrease, and we're currently waiting on a rain right now that should hit tonight. Hopefully that comes, and if not, then we could be disking up all of our corn within the next couple of days, according to our crop insurance guy. So we're really hoping this rain hits.
Pray for rain. I know the crop when I was there was unlike anything I have seen, and I worked in corn research for a number of years, so I can definitely understand why they are pointing you in that direction. And I hope that the rain hits then tonight. So we need everybody to pray for rain, right?
Yes, that would be great.
So why don't you tell us about your farm and ranch operation?
So I'm the fourth generation of Leffler Farms Incorporated in Americus, Kansas, and I grew up in just a town, little under 1,000 people, and our operation started in 1941 in what was considered the Fruitland community. And basically we're about a 50-50 split between cropland and pasture land. We're right in the heart of the Flint Hills, and we're lucky enough to be based right on a river, and that gives us really nice river bottom ground to raise good crops on, to feed our cattle, and be a little bit more diversified to spread out our risk. And so on our operation right now, my grandpa just moved into assisted living, and so now it's my dad and I working full-time on the operation, and we don't have any hired hands, and so we manage the place ourselves, and my mom and sister help out when they can too.
Is this where you envisioned yourself in life at this point?
Not at all. I think all of my friends growing up, they couldn't believe it when I moved back home, and I really couldn't either. So it's kind of a surprise for everybody, but I feel like God had a plan in it, and I'm here and I'm loving it.
So when you went through high school, were you active in 4-H and FFA or anything like that?
My high school did not have FFA, even though we're the most rural school you could have. People call it Cow Patty High. And we didn't have FFA. I didn't even know what FFA was growing up. I was very active in 4-H. We did anything from cooking to showing cattle to doing project talks at club days and different things like that. So 4-H was definitely a big part of my life growing up.
And then in high school, you were really active in sport.
Yes, I was very active in track and field. I was a thrower. I threw shot put, discus, and javelin, and then I later threw hammer in college. I competed on the USA Junior Olympic circuit and ended up winning that and placing almost every year at the national meets. And I won state all 4 times, all 4 years, in both the shot put and the discus. And I was the second girl ever to do that in the state of Kansas. So it was a lot of fun, and it taught me a lot about hard work and dedication.
And that was at the high school level?
Yes.
Because then you went on to college and you kicked butt there too.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say I kicked butt, but I definitely had a lot of fun while I was there. I competed at Kansas State University on a full ride track and field scholarship, which was great to come out of college debt free, and placed in the Big 12 a few times and made it to nationals, and it was just a great experience. Not everybody gets to compete at that level, and I'm really blessed to be able to say that I was.
What was your goal through college? What was your major, and what did you think you were going to do past college?
My goal in college was to compete at the Olympic level. That was really why I went to college, was to continue doing track. But to do track, you had to get a degree, and so I chose kinesiology, and I took that route so that I could learn about how the body works. And as I was competing, I started having surgeries, and that kind of kept me understanding what my body was reacting to and why it was reacting the way that it was to certain training. And then I also ended up with a family studies and human services degree also to finish out my eligibility. But I forgot to study ag when I was at the best ag college in the nation. So everybody thinks that I studied agriculture because I went to Kansas State, but I definitely forgot to do that while I was there.
But you had different aspirations in mind of what you were going to do. You have a pre-med degree.
Yes.
So what is kinesiology? Did I say it right?
Yes. It's basically just the study of the human body and how it moves and how it works and functions. A lot of people that want to go into collegiate coaching will major in kinesiology, and that's essentially why I did it. It's because I wanted to coach collegiately when I finished competing myself.
When did you start having surgeries, and what, I guess, was your first injury?
So my first injury was in high school. I tore out a ligament in my ankle. And then my second one was at regional track meet my senior year. Going into the state track meet, I tore my ACL throwing the javelin. And I told my mom I didn't need to go to the doctor and I was going to compete at state the next day. And so next thing I knew, we were at the state track meet, and my physical therapist came with us and taped me up and hooked a stim unit to my knee, and we were thrown at the state track meet. And next thing I knew, I had defended both of my titles. And when we went to the doctor the following week, and he said, "You don't even have an ACL in your knee, which is what holds your whole knee together." And he goes, "And you competed last week?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And then I realized why he was asking me those questions. And that's when I realized that I would be sitting out my whole first year of college due to that injury. And that's really what got me interested in studying how the body moves and works.
Wow. That's an intensity I have never understood. My mom, she ran her first marathon at age 50, and she ran with a broken foot. And I thought she was I still think she was insane to go ahead and run it. How do you get through that pain? What is your mindset?
I think I was just so determined. Nobody really knew that I was hurt, and there was news articles out saying that I was a triple threat that year to win all three at state, shot, disc, and javelin. And I was just bound and determined to defend my titles and defend the records that I'd already set. And I had a fantastic coach throughout high school, and I owe so much to that guy, and he just motivated me to keep going. And next thing I knew, we had done what we set out to do and was just on to the next step.
Wow, that is incredible perseverance. Incredible. Then were you able to compete on your sophomore year of college?
Yeah, so I redshirted my first year and came back that summer and competed at the junior USAs in Oregon in the shot put, and came back off of that really well. And then I was able to compete in uniform the rest of my career at K-State. But it seemed like I was just plagued by injury. Every year I had a major surgery at the end of the competition year. And so I'd grind my way back through rehab, and then we'd start back in with indoor season. And then usually something would go wrong right around the beginning of outdoor season, and then I'd have another surgery, and then we'd grind again. And I did that for 5 years, and now my body's paying for it a little bit. But
you are incredibly strong person.
I just have a high pain tolerance.
I guess. I don't think I could handle all of that. As you were going through all of this, are you able to, how are you making connections and relationships? I know as somebody that comes from a rural area and is thrown into a large university, it can be very intimidating. Were you with other people that were from rural areas?
Really, I was around a lot of my teammates. That was basically my community to start out with, and a lot of them turned out to be just farm kids or small town kids, and not just on my team, but on some of the other sports teams as well. And it's been fun to watch our paths cross. Even as we're done competing, I'm in a leadership class right now, and one of my former teammates, he grew up on Gardner Angus Ranch, and, it's just been neat to see that all these small town kids did big things. And we ended up finding each other in college. We all kind of grouped together pretty fast.
What did other students think about, I guess, your lifestyle at home? And what kinds of questions did you get about your farm or ranch from those people who aren't familiar?
One of my favorite things is my family's always been really open to me bringing home whoever I want to show them our farm and ranch. And one weekend I brought home two of my teammates, one who's from the inner city and another one that just grew up in a very large city. And we took the back roads home, and they started to see our cattle, and they said, well, do they all have names? How do you keep track of them all? And then we drove by a cornfield, and they wanted to know how long it took us to pick that field. And I said, oh, maybe an hour. It wasn't a really big field. They looked at me like I was crazy. Well, then I realized they thought the whole neighborhood came out and handpicked our cornfields. And so it was a great weekend of questions and learning and just teaching them about where their food actually comes from.
I think we take for granted what people actually know.
It was pretty comical. I didn't know what to think.
It's so interesting to see different perspectives and learn so much about different people and, what their beliefs are. So I was just curious, what others thought about how you had grown up. So now you are graduated. Did you still think you were going to go into training or coaching, or what was the thought process?
So there was an opening back home at a place that I wanted to apply at, and our rental house on our farm, which is my great-grandma's house, our renters were just moving out, and so it was just kind of a perfect timing. And so I said, hey, Dad, do you care if I just move into that house until I figure out what I'm going to do? And he said, no, that's great. Better than having it vacant. And so I moved in, and then I started working on the farm, and I thought that'd just kind of be a part-time thing until I found something I really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then I got the phone call one day that the job at the local college was open to coach on the track and field team. And I said, absolutely. And so for 2 years, I coached collegiately at Emporia State University while helping my dad on the farm. And so those were some very, very long days. But they were very rewarding, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time there.
You kind of had the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it was the best of both worlds for sure. I spent from 7 in the morning until 3 o'clock on our farm, and then I'd go in and coach, and then I'd come back home and help take care of whatever else needed done and start all over the next day. So it was just the two things I love the most in life, all in one day, every day.
And then you kind of got the entrepreneurship bug.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's talk about that a little.
That would be a good way of stating what happened next. So 4-H was always a really big thing to me growing up. And at the end of every year of showing, we got to sell our animals at the premium sale. And people were always calling us after that sale who didn't want to pay the premium and just wanted to buy the animal and see if we had any extras they could buy. And so I got to thinking one day, and my sister just got done showing her last year because we're 7.5 years apart. And I thought, I should start raising some extra cattle around that time frame. And then around fair time, when people don't want to spend the extra money, then they could buy it from me instead. And so that's where Leffler Prime Performance, which is my little niche of the business, came into play. So that's the prime part. And then the performance part came into, I started to see there was a need on our farm for me to be here more. My grandpa was just getting ready to move into assisted living after he broke his hip, and I knew my dad needed me here more, and I don't have any brothers, and so I took it upon myself to be that next person that's going to take over the farm. And I decided that could still keep coaching, but it just couldn't be at the collegiate level because of time constraints. And so I started private coaching high school kids. That's just been phenomenal to be able to pour into kids and not only coach them in their sport, but coach them in life a little bit too. And I have a great passion for that. And so I've once again got to be able to combine, my two passions under one roof again. And so it's been really good.
Love it. Love it.
I like to be efficient.
You're just an awesome person. Just strength and just awesome. I wish everybody could meet you. One of my interests right now is learning everything there is to learn about the cattle industry. So let's really dive into your purpose in the cattle industry.
Yeah, so we used to have a cow-calf operation until about 2001, and our local Tyson plant closed, the butchering side of things, and so we thought it was going to be more cost-efficient for us to instead go to stockers and feeders.
So what is a feeder and what is a stocker and what's the difference?
So a feeder is more of your calf that's going to eat at a feedlot that's our terminology that we use here. The stockers are what's out on the grass. So there are Flint Hills cattle that are out on grass all summer and eat that way. And so our role in the cattle industry is we're buying calves at around 500 pounds, and then we're sending them to a backgrounding lot where we'll pick them up about 2 months later. They'll get shipped out to either our feedlot, or if it's during the summertime, we put them straight out to grass. And that's the best part of living in the Flint Hills. We literally have the best grass in the U.S. It not only makes a pretty picture, but it makes for great, efficient feed. And so we usually put them out around June 1st. It might be mid-May, depending on the year. And then we'll pull those calves off of grass around August, and hopefully they're weighing around 850 pounds. And typically we have a buyer that will come in and buy those cattle right off of grass and take them to whatever feedlot they want to finish them at, or we might choose to retain ownership that year and send them to a feedlot ourselves and finish them out.
And the feeders, would that be then part of the Prime Performance, Leffler Prime Performance?
Yeah, so either I take off the top of our stockers at the end of their grass-fed period, and then I'll go and finish them out. And that's where I start my part of the business. And so my dad's nice enough to let me pick out whatever cattle I want, however many I want. And then I feed them out at my house. And then I try to find the local freezers to put them in once that time comes.
So at what age are they when they leave your property?
I really don't know ages. I just know weights.
Weights, okay.
Because we function in, like my dad and I basically, when we talk cattle, we don't ever talk age since we're not cow-calf. We always talk weights because weights are how we're selling things. That's how we're moving our product, is by the weight. And so to me, the age doesn't really matter as much as long as it's not like a 3-year-old steer that's not finishing out good.
They spend a significant amount of time on grass, which is something that I think the general public doesn't understand. This isn't an animal that's going to become meat that's labeled grass-fed.
Correct.
I think there's confusion within the general public about, am I purchasing meat from cattle that have lived their whole lives on a feedlot? Can you talk about the misconception that a lot of people who aren't familiar with beef have about grass-fed versus corn-fed and feedlots?
Yeah. So basically, my cattle that I'm feeding out are typically on grass 3 to 4 months out of their lifespan. And then I grain finish them with corn or silage that's been raised here on our farm. And so you can say I use the label local. I don't get into the labels of grass finished or grain finished. I try to stick with things that are relevant. And so I feel like local is something that is eye-catching, but it doesn't put that misconception out there like what you're talking about. Really the protein content is actually just a fraction higher on grain finished. The zinc is a little bit higher. The iron is a little lower than the grass fed. The only thing that those grass finished calves are really beating us at on the grain finished side is that their total fat is just a little bit less than what a grain finished animal is.
And I really like the taste of a grain-fed animal versus the grass-fed. And I'm assuming that's because of the higher fat content.
Yeah, it's that extra marbling, which would be the little white streaks that you see throughout a steak. And I think that gives it a little bit more flavor. It just gives a better taste to the meat itself, I think. But it's all personal preference. Some people really like a lean steak, and they also like it super well done. I like mine to be nice and red and a lot of marbling.
Very nice. For anyone that maybe isn't familiar with the term silage, can you describe what that means?
So silage for us is usually we'll use a shorter corn number, which means that it'll mature faster. And so it should mature quicker than the corn that we're going to take all the way into the elevator for the kernels. And so silage is when they come in and they take the whole plant and they basically just grind it up and they shoot it into a truck for us. And then we take that truck and dump it in our silo and then we pack it in really tight. And so it kind of seals itself, and then it keeps it fresh year-round for our cattle to eat when we feed it.
I love the way silage smells. I'm not sure if there's fermentation that's happening.
Yes. If you see the juice coming out of it, it would actually have a pretty high alcohol content. So when I was a kid, my dad always told me, if you go watch a raccoon drink the juice, it'll walk away wobbly. And sure enough, it does every time. Yeah, I don't think I would try it.
No. Oh, that's funny. How many cattle do you have on your land every year on an average?
On an average, probably for grass cattle, it could be up to 450. But this year it's been so dry that we chose to be proactive and lower our numbers. And it's a really good thing we did that because we have a couple of ponds that are already dried up and the grass is kind of a really terrible yellowish green color from the lack of rain. And so this year we only have around 350 head out on grass. Our feedlot can hold up to 1,500 head of cattle. We don't ever have it completely full, but we're looking at trying to market a little better so we can utilize that a little bit more efficiently.
So if your ponds are drying up, how are cattle getting their water?
If it doesn't rain soon, we're going to be hauling water to our ponds and or pulling those cattle off grass and putting them in our feedlot where we have tanks that are free-flowing water, and we have a couple of pens that have springs in them that haven't dried up either. So hopefully it doesn't come to that, and hopefully we can catch a rain this week. But if not, that's kind of in our game plan.
Will that increase your cost on the feed?
Yeah, and the bad thing is, as you saw when you were out at our place, we emptied out our silo to a neighbor and sold the excess that we had. And so right now we don't have any silage to feed. We just have some corn and hay. And so we're really hoping that we actually have some corn to put into the silo this year, because right now we're sitting on zero feed. So it's a little scary and stressful right now.
At what stage do you harvest the corn for silage?
It's usually right around, I think it's around 28% on moisture. And so usually for us, that means within 10 days of the start of August is typically when we'll start here.
We really need the rain in order for you to have the tassels that will then pollinate the silks on the corn ear, which then creates the kernels. So you're really in a very difficult spot right now.
Yeah, we might just have to disc it under, basically, which does provide nutrients back into the ground, but we'd much rather have that corn out of the ground and in the silo for feed or in the grain bin with grain. So just kind of touch and go right now as we watch and see if anything happens. There was a rain chance that went through about 30 minutes ago that I'm assuming missed because I never saw any rain hit my windshield.
Well, I sure hope that you do get rain. Just personally seeing it, it's getting to be a desperate situation for you and I'm sure many others who are in the Flint Hills there. Where does the drought start and end? geographically within Kansas?
Right now, the drought is really hitting where we are, which is kind of east central Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, 2 days after you left, everybody got rain within about 30 minutes of us. And so it's just getting frustrating because the rains have just been really spotty. You just never quite know where exactly the drought per se is. But I can tell you it's definitely hitting right here. I know my dad has said that he hasn't seen anything like this since 1980.
Wow. Wow. Well, I sure do hope that you get some relief soon. You are posting on social media about the drought and what is going on.
Yes.
So where can people follow you if they want to follow along?
Yeah, so on Facebook, it's my name, and then on Twitter, it's at JAXLEF14, and my Instagram account is the same as my Twitter.
Let's change the mood up. You've been very active in different organizations and continue to do so. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so when I came home, I was, I guess you could consider the young kid back on the farm, and it seems like every board in our community was looking for somebody to be on the board, and Farm Bureau got me first, and so I got on our county board, and next thing I knew, I was enrolled in their leadership program that they do statewide called Leadership KFB, and let me tell you, if you ever have a chance to do a leadership program that's anything like that, jump in and do it, because I got to see all different aspects of agriculture across the state of Kansas, anywhere from western Kansas at the feedlots to urban agriculture in Kansas City. And then we finished up the class in D.C., and it made me want to become a lobbyist. When I got done, I thought, wow, this is so neat. I had no idea agriculture really encompassed that much, and that you know, just difference of things. Even though I grew up in agriculture, my eyes were opened a lot.
What was the most interesting thing that you took from DC?
I think it was just the lobbying power that the commodity groups or Farm Bureau or Kansas Livestock Association really have. I mean, they're there at bat for us farmers and ranchers, and I don't think we give those organizations enough credit. But I also took away that, you know, I sat at Pat Roberts' desk and talked to him about our struggles here, and he cared, you know, and that meant a lot to me that he was there to listen and he asked questions, and we were able to watch part of the Farm Bill hearing while we were there, and then I followed it up and got to watch the hearing when I was at the annual conference for Farm Bureau and watch President Trump sign a bill for rural broadband. And so it was just kind of a full circle with that leadership class, but it gave me a greater appreciation for everybody that does live that life on the Hill every day.
And rural broadband is a subject that could take a whole other podcast episode. Can you talk a little bit about the bill that President Trump signed in regards to rural broadband?
Yeah, so basically what I can tell is that it's just trying to allocate funding for rural areas to actually get good service. I know in my area it's a struggle. I talked to our internet repair guy the other day about it, and he said, well, yeah, we might be getting some money from it, but we're going to use it in Missouri instead. And so, you know, it just grows even more frustrations of where that money is actually going to be allocated and whether or not it's actually going to come out here and benefit us or not. And so I think it's kind of a flip of a coin right now. I'm excited to see if it can help us out here, because I can't even have this conversation in my own house because I don't get service.
We tried to do this, and I actually had to leave my house in order to get a strong enough signal and use somebody else's internet to record this podcast episode. So it's definitely an issue. How do you think, or do you have a good handle on where people can find more information and, you know, really put our voices out there so that Congress understands the need and, you know, how we are struggling and how many farmers rely on broad internet for running the tractor?
Yeah, I know here in Kansas Farm Bureau right now is running an app where you can test your speed. And so basically if you're in a really low reception area, they want you to test your speed at that spot, and then you can send in your results. and then they're going to compile all of this and send it off to somebody that's going to listen. And so that's one way that they're doing it. For me, I know I've gotten on social media and tweeted about how maybe I've lost connection with RTK, which is our GPS system for our tractors, or, maybe how one day I'm frustrated because I can't get certain technology to work while I'm in the cab because we're running it off a cellular service on an iPad. A lot of people think social media is a waste when it comes to talking about those types of frustrations, but somebody's going to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that somebody passes it on to somebody that can do something.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you just have to let your voice be heard anytime you can and have the opportunity to talk about those issues that are important and are affecting our everyday life, whether it be in the tractor cab or maybe your kids at home trying to do their homework and they can't get good internet service. I mean, it ranges on all spectrums.
That's a good point. We are in a very rural school district, and there are areas in the district that do not have internet. So it is very frustrating.
Yeah, it's definitely an issue. I think it is important to make sure that when you are letting your voice be heard, that the person that's hearing your voice truly understands what your voice is trying to say. And I think a lot of times in ag, our voice gets stretched a little bit and taken out of context. And I think it's really important that we make sure that's not happening. And when it does, that we follow up and make sure that our truth is being told in the correct manner. And I think the more social media becomes more and more prominent, I think that's only going to become more important for our industry.
If you were someone who had been interviewed for an article and you had requested to read that article before it was published and that did not happen, what would you do? Would you go to social media and correct what you had said?
Yeah, I think you go in and, number one, you can always politely and respectfully talk to the person that wrote the article and just let them know just your feelings. This way, maybe they won't do it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you can definitely go on and post the article, and then you can add your correction to it within your post. It could be just the smallest detail to the largest detail. But I think it's important that you always stand behind the truth that you were trying to portray and don't let somebody skew the story that was supposed to be there.
Amen to that. That's great advice. Sharing your voice and making sure your voice is heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to miss every shot that you don't take is what I was always told growing up in sports. And
yes,
I think that is completely relevant.
Well, we are at the end of our time, and let's go ahead and if you can share one more time where people can find you on social media, because you really are an incredible person that everybody should be following. Go ahead and share that again.
Yeah, on Twitter and Instagram, I'm at JAXLEF14. And then on Facebook, I just go by my name, and then my business page is Leffler Prime Performance.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to letting me come and see your little slice of heaven and talk with you and your dad as well. But we just had an incredible visit and learned so much from the both of you about cattle and wheat and life in general. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for coming out. We enjoyed your trip here.
Well, thank you for joining this episode of Keeping Ag Real. Visit the website at www.keepingagreal.com.